The sun hung low over the dusty town of Red Creek, painting the wooden buildings in shades of gold and rust. It was one of those evenings when everything felt still, as if the whole town was holding its breath. A lone horse trotted down the main road, its rider sitting tall in the saddle. The man's name was Jack Turner, a quiet cowboy with tired eyes that had seen too much of the world. His hat was worn, his boots dusty, and his face carried the calm of a man who didn't speak unless he had something to say. When he reached the saloon, he dismounted slowly, patting his horse's neck before tying it to the post. The few townsfolk standing around turned to stare. Red Creek didn't get many strangers, especially ones who carried themselves like that. Confident but humble, rough but kind. Inside the saloon, the air smelled of tobacco and old wood. Conversations hushed when Jack stepped in. The bartender, wiping a glass with a rag, looked up nervously. "Evening, stranger," he greeted. "You lost or looking for someone?" Jack's voice was low and calm. "I was told the sheriff wanted to see me." A man in a dark vest turned from the corner table. "Sheriff Claymore." He was a big man with a gruff voice and a face that had forgotten how to smile. "You're the drifter they call Jack Turner, ain't you?" Jack nodded. "That's right." The sheriff stood, his boots thudding against the floorboards. "Heard you've been working your way through the valley. Mended fences, helped folks rebuild. That true?" "Just trying to earn my keep," Jack replied simply. The sheriff studied him for a long moment, then motioned for him to sit. The saloon grew quiet again, as if the whole town was listening. "Red Creek's in bad shape," the sheriff began. "Drought's been hard on us. Men are leaving, farms are dying. We need someone who knows how to fix things, someone who won't run when it gets tough." Jack folded his hands on the table. "I can work," he said, "but I ain't looking for trouble." The sheriff leaned back in his chair and said with a crooked grin, "Ain't talking about trouble, cowboy. I'm talking about staying. You help this town get back on its feet and you can have your own land once your own start." Jack looked at him curiously. "And what's the catch?" Claymore chuckled. "No catch, just a promise. Red Creek's got plenty of land and plenty of women looking for a man who can make something of it. You do the work and I'll let you choose any woman in this town to start a new life with. Fair deal?" The room went silent. All eyes turned to Jack. Some men smirked, waiting for his reaction. Some of the women whispered behind their hands. Jack didn't answer right away. He looked around, went at the cracked walls, the tired faces, the women standing near the bar. Most wore hopeful expressions, thinking the stranger might choose one of them. But Jack's eyes moved past them and settled on a quiet figure near the door. She was standing half in the shadows, holding a basket close to her chest. Her name was Martha Green. She was known by everyone in Red Creek, not because she was beautiful by their standards, but because she was different. She was larger than most, soft-spoken and always working, baking bread for the orphanage, mending clothes for old Mrs. Howard, helping anyone who asked without expecting anything in return. Most folks never paid her much attention, some even whispered cruel words behind her back. Jack noticed how she avoided everyone's eyes as if she was used to being invisible, but there was something gentle in her face, something strong in the way she stood. The sheriff followed Jack's gaze and frowned. "You can pick any woman, cowboy. Don't rush it. Some fine ladies here tonight." But Jack had already made up his mind. He pushed his chair back and stood. The wooden floor creaked beneath his boots. "I've made my choice," he said quietly. The sheriff blinked in surprise. "Already? Well, who's the lucky one?" Jack's voice was calm but steady. "The woman by the door. The one holding the basket." The room went so still that you could hear a fly buzzing near the lamp. Then came a few chuckles, low at first, then louder. Someone muttered, "He's gone mad." Another man laughed. "Out of all the women, he picks her?" The sheriff raised his brows. "You mean Martha Green?" Jack nodded. "That's right." Martha's face turned red. She looked around as whispers spread like wildfire. Her heart pounded so fast she could hardly breathe. Why would anyone choose her? Especially a man like him. The sheriff scratched his beard, half amused and half baffled. "Well, son, it's your choice. But, you sure?" Jack's eyes didn't waver. "I'm sure. She looks like someone who's been through storms and still stands. That's the kind of person I trust." The laughter died down a little. Something in his tone made the others quiet. He wasn't joking. He meant it. Jack walked toward Martha. His steps were slow, respectful. When he stopped in front of her, he removed his hat. "Ma'am," he said softly, I hope I didn't embarrass you. I just reckon I'd like to get to know you. Maybe work together if you're willing." Martha's hands trembled around her basket. You don't even know me," she whispered. Jack smiled kindly. "Maybe not yet, but I've seen enough to know you don't give up easy. That's all a man needs to know." Her throat felt tight. No one had ever spoken to her like that. Not without pity, not without judgment. She could barely find her voice. "If you mean it," she said quietly, "I'll help. I'll do my part." Jack nodded, putting his hat back on. "Then we'll start tomorrow. The fields won't fix themselves." As he turned to leave, the sheriff called after him, still shaking his head. "You sure are a strange one, Turner, but maybe Red Creek needs strange men like you." Jack stopped at the door, looked back once at Martha, and tipped his hat again. "No, Sheriff," he said simply. "Red Creek just needs people who still believe in something." When he walked out into the evening light, the town was buzzing with whispers. Some laughed, others looked puzzled. But Martha just stood there, her heart pounding. For the first time in her life, someone had seen her, not as a joke, not as a burden, but as a person. As she stepped outside a few minutes later, she saw Jack waiting by his horse. The sky had turned shades of pink and orange, and the wind carried the faint smell of rain. He looked at her and smiled, the kind of smile that wasn't forced, just honest. "Tomorrow morning at the North Field," he said gently. "Bring gloves if you have any." "We've got a lot to fix," Martha nodded. "I'll be there." Jack mounted his horse and tipped his hat once more. "Good night, Miss Green." "Good night, Mr. Turner," she replied softly. As he rode away, Martha stood in the fading light, her heart warm in a way it hadn't been in years. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but for the first time, she wanted to find out. Behind her, inside the saloon, the sheriff poured himself another drink and muttered half to himself, half to the empty room. "Maybe that cowboy sees something we all missed." And as night settled over Red Creek, the wind carried a new kind of whisper through town, one that spoke not of laughter or doubt, but of change. The morning sun rose slowly over Red Creek, lighting up the quiet town with its golden warmth. The wind carried the smell of fresh earth, and birds sang softly from the fences. Jack Turner was already in the North Field, standing beside an old plow that had seen better days. His hat shaded his eyes as he studied the dry land stretched out before him. It wasn't much. Cracked soil, broken fences, and a barn that leaned like it might fall any second. But to Jack it was a start. He rolled up his sleeves, his hands rough from years of work, and began to clear the field. Sweat gathered on his brow as he pulled weeds, lifted rocks, and checked the tools left behind by whoever once worked this land. A gentle voice broke the silence behind him. "You started early." Jack turned around. Martha stood a few steps away, holding a basket and a pair of worn gloves. Her dress was plain, her hair tied back neatly, and a few strands had escaped to frame her face. She looked nervous, unsure if she belonged there. Jack smiled softly. "Couldn't sleep much. The ground won't wait, and neither should we." She smiled a little, stepping closer. "I brought you some biscuits and coffee. Thought you might need something before you start work." Jack accepted the basket with a nod of gratitude. "Thank you, ma'am. You didn't have to. I wanted to," she said simply. "If we're working together, we should start the day right." They shared breakfast sitting on a log by the field. Jack ate quietly, savoring every bite. The biscuits were warm and soft, and the coffee was strong, just the way he liked it. "These are real good," he said. Martha blushed faintly. "I bake for the bakery in town. Been doing it for years." "That explains it," Jack replied. "You've got skill." She looked down at her hands, which were rough from years of kneading dough. "People don't usually call it skill. They say I just make food because that's all I can do." Jack looked at her seriously. "Don't listen to people who don't see your worth, Martha. You make something that gives comfort. That's more important than most things." Her eyes met his, surprised by the honesty in his tone. No one had ever spoken to her that way. It felt strange but good, like a door opening inside her heart. After breakfast, they began their work. Martha helped him fix the fence first, holding the wooden post steady while Jack hammered the nails. The sun climbed higher, and the sound of their tools echoed through the quiet air. By noon, they were both covered in dust and sweat. Martha's back ached, but she didn't complain. She wanted to prove she could work just as hard as anyone. Jack noticed her effort and smiled quietly to himself. "You don't give up easy, do you?" he asked. She shook her head, wiping her forehead with her sleeve. If I gave up every time something got hard, I'd have nothing left. That's the spirit, Jack said with admiration. You remind me of the women I grew up around. Strong, steady, never backing down. They paused under the shade of an old oak tree for lunch. Martha shared bread and cheese she had packed. Jack poured water from his canteen. The air was warm, and for a moment the world felt peaceful. Jack, she said after a while, hesitating. Why did you really choose me? Jack looked at her thoughtfully. Because when I saw you, you weren't trying to impress anyone. You were just being yourself. There's honesty in that. This town's full of people pretending to be something they're not. You stood quiet, but strong. That kind of strength lasts. Martha blinked, her throat tight. Most people only see my size, she whispered. Not my strength, Jack smiled gently. Then they're blind. A silence stretched between them, not awkward but warm. The kind that said more than words ever could. As the day went on, they kept working. Jack showed her how to handle tools safely, how to tie fence wires, and how to check for soft spots in the soil. Martha listened carefully, learning quickly. She was clumsy at first, but determined. Every mistake she made, she corrected the next time. By sunset, the field looked different, cleaner, stronger, alive with effort. They both stood back to admire their progress. Looks like we did something today, Jack said, dusting his hands. Martha nodded, smiling for the first time in a long while. It's been a while since I felt proud of something. You should feel proud every day, he said softly. You've got more heart than most men I've known. She laughed lightly, shaking her head. You say that like it's a good thing. It is, he said. Heart's what keeps people going when nothing else does. That night, Martha returned home with aching hands but a light heart. She couldn't stop thinking about the way Jack spoke. Calm, sincere, and free of judgment. For years, she had heard whispers behind her back, cruel laughter and pitying looks, but Jack's words washed all that away. She sat by the small window of her kitchen, looking out at the stars. For the first time, she felt seen, truly seen. The next few days followed the same rhythm. Every morning, Martha arrived early with food, and they worked side by side until sunset. They fixed the fences, cleaned the barn, and planted new seeds in the dry soil. Each day, Jack shared a little more about his life, how he'd lost his family young, how he wandered from town to town looking for a place that felt like home. Martha listened, her heart aching for the quiet sorrow behind his eyes. And Jack learned about her, how she'd cared for her sick parents until they passed, how she stayed in Red Creek because it was all she'd ever known. One evening, when the sky turned pink and purple, they stood by the field again, watching the wind ripple through the grass. Jack broke the silence. You know, Martha, people in town are starting to talk. She frowned slightly. About what? About us, he said simply. Some think it's funny. Some think I'm foolish. Her eyes fell to the ground. I knew it wouldn't take long. Jack stepped closer. Let them talk. Words don't fix fences, and gossip doesn't grow crops. She looked up at him, searching his face. You don't care what they say? He shook his head. I care about what's real. You're real. That's enough. Martha felt something stir inside her, and a warmth she hadn't felt in years, maybe ever. As the sun disappeared beyond the hills, she turned to him and said quietly, You're different, Jack Turner. Most men wouldn't even look at me twice. Jack smiled faintly. Then most men don't know what they're missing. Her breath caught for a moment, and she turned away quickly, pretending to check the tools. But her cheeks burned with a shy smile she couldn't hide. That night, as Jack watched her walk back toward town, he realized something unexpected. He had come to Red Creek looking for work, for land, and a new start. But now, when he looked at Martha, he saw something far more valuable than land or money. He saw peace. He saw kindness. He saw a woman whose quiet strength filled the empty spaces in his soul, and though he didn't say it aloud deep down, Jack Turner knew he hadn't just chosen Martha. Somehow Martha had chosen him too. One afternoon, the sheriff stopped by on horseback. He watched the pair from a distance before calling out, You're really doing it, Turner. Didn't think anyone could bring that old ranch back to life. Jack wiped the sweat from his forehead and smiled faintly. It's not just me, Sheriff. Couldn't do it without Martha. The sheriff chuckled. Well, I'll be. That woman's got more grit than half the men in this town. Martha, standing nearby with her hands covered in flour from baking, blushed and gave a small, embarrassed smile. I just do what needs to be done, she said softly. The sheriff tipped his hat and rode off, but his words stayed with her all day. For years, she'd been the woman people mocked or ignored. Now the same town was beginning to notice, not for how she looked, but for what she did. As the days turned into weeks, the bond between her and Jack grew quietly stronger. They didn't speak of feelings. They didn't have to. The way Jack handed her tools without being asked, or the way Martha saved him the last piece of pie after a long day, it all said enough. One evening, after a long day repairing the barn roof, Jack sat on the porch steps, his shirt damp with sweat. Martha came out carrying 2 cups of cool water. The sky above was painted in orange and pink. "Here," she said, handing him one. "You've worked too hard today." He took the cup and drank deeply. "So have you," he said, glancing at her. "You've been cooking, baking, cleaning, and still found time to fix those window shutters." She laughed softly. "I don't like to sit still too long. Makes the day feel empty." Jack looked out toward the horizon. "Funny. I used to think peace meant being alone. No noise, no people, just quiet. But lately, I've realized it's not the silence that brings peace. It's who you share the silence with." Martha looked at him, her heart catching for a moment. She wanted to say something, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, she just smiled. "You sure have a way with words, Mr. Turner." He grinned slightly. "Only when they mean something." As the days passed, Red Creek began to change. With Jack's help, the fences were fixed, the crops began to grow, and hope slowly returned to the townspeople. The fields that once looked dead now shimmered with green shoots. It felt like the land itself was waking up again. Martha started to notice changes in herself, too. She no longer walked with her head down when she went to town. She smiled at people. And some, not all, but some, smiled back. Children waved when she passed the bakery, and the shopkeeper, who once ignored her, now greeted her warmly. But not everyone was kind. One afternoon, as Martha was buying flour, 2 women standing by the counter whispered loudly enough for her to hear. "Can you believe that drifter still stays with her?" one said. "A man like that could have had anyone." The other chuckled. "He's probably just being nice. Pity, more like." Martha's hands trembled slightly as she paid for the flour and walked out. She didn't cry, she'd heard worse before. But something about their tone hurt more this time. Maybe because now, for the first time, she had something to lose. When she reached the ranch, Jack noticed her quietness right away. "Something wrong?" he asked. She shook her head. "Just tired," but he didn't believe her. "You sure? You look like something's weighing on you." Martha hesitated before finally saying, "People still talk, Jack, about us, about me. They say you're just doing this out of pity." Jack set down the tools in his hands and turned to face her. His eyes were calm but serious. "Do you believe that?" She looked down at the ground. "I don't know what to believe sometimes." He stepped closer. "Then listen to me. I didn't choose you because I felt sorry for you. I chose you because when everyone else looked away, you stood tall. You didn't break. You didn't hide. That's worth more to me than any pretty face." Her eyes filled with tears she tried to hide. "No one's ever said something like that to me before." Jack smiled softly. "Then it's about time someone did." She laughed through the tears, shaking her head. "You sure know how to make a woman speechless." "Just telling the truth," he said simply. The next morning, they went back to work as usual, but something between them had changed. There was a deeper understanding, a quiet warmth that didn't need words. Jack would sometimes catch Martha humming while she baked, and every time he heard that soft tune, he smiled without realizing it. As summer drew near, the town prepared for its annual harvest fair. It was a tradition that had almost died out after years of hardship, but this year people were determined to celebrate again. The sheriff himself announced that Red Creek was alive and kicking, and everyone cheered. When Martha mentioned the fair to Jack, she sounded uncertain. "I haven't gone in years," she admitted. "Never had anyone to go with." Jack looked up from his work. "Well, you do now. We'll go together." She blinked. "You mean it?" "Of course," he said with a grin. "You've earned a day of rest and some fun." The day of the fair arrived warm and bright. Music filled the air, and laughter echoed through the open field where colorful tents stood. Martha wore a simple blue dress that she had sewn herself. It wasn't fancy, but it brought out the color in her eyes. When Jack saw her, his breath caught for a second. "You look different," he said, not finding the right word. Martha smiled shyly. Different good or different strange? Jack chuckled. Different beautiful. Her cheeks flushed and she looked away, pretending to fix her hair. You're kind, Jack. Not kind, he said. Honest. At the fair, people watched them again, but this time the stares felt different. Some were curious, some were surprised, but most were warm. Martha even caught the sheriff giving her a proud nod from across the crowd. They played simple games, shared pie, and laughed like old friends. When a local band began playing slow music, Jack extended his hand. Dance with me? Martha hesitated. Jack, I don't know how, he smiled. Then let me teach you. As they stepped into the open space, the crowd around them seemed to fade away. Jack guided her gently, his hand steady on hers. She laughed when she stepped on his boot, and he just smiled. You're doing fine, he said softly. In that moment, Martha forgot the whispers, the stares, and the doubts. All she saw was the man who had believed in her when no one else did. The song ended and applause rose from the crowd. Martha blushed and Jack bowed jokingly, making her laugh again. That night, as they walked back under the stars, Martha felt something she hadn't felt in years. Happiness without fear. She glanced at Jack walking beside her, calm and steady as always. Jack, she said quietly. Thank you for not giving up on me. He looked at her with gentle eyes. Martha, I think you're the one who never gave up. On yourself, on this town, on life. I just happened to notice. As they reached the gate of the ranch, the moonlight fell across their path. Jack stopped and said softly, This place, this land, everything we've built, it's because of you. You turned it into a home. Her heart swelled with emotion, and for a long moment neither of them spoke. The only sound was the wind moving through the wheat field. Soft, steady, full of promise. And somewhere deep in her heart, Martha realized that love didn't always arrive with grand gestures or fancy words. Sometimes it came quietly, in shared work, in small kindnesses, and in a cowboy's steady gaze that saw beauty where others never looked. The days in Red Creek were growing warmer as summer fully settled in. The fields that Jack and Martha had worked so hard to repair were now bright green, full of crops ready to grow tall and strong. Life in the town had slowly begun to change. People who had once been quiet and withdrawn were now working alongside one another, helping repair fences, mending barns, and sharing laughter. Red Creek was alive again, and much of that revival came from the quiet determination of a man and a woman who had refused to give up. Martha woke early every morning, just as she had for years, but now she had someone beside her who made the work feel lighter. Jack had a steady rhythm to his days. Always first to rise, always first to start fixing whatever needed fixing. And somehow he made even the hardest work feel less like a chore. Martha had learned to anticipate his movements, to hand him the tools he would need, to encourage him with small smiles or quick jokes. Together, they were more than just two people working. They were a team. One morning, as the sun painted the sky a bright orange, Martha carried a basket of fresh bread to the barn. She found Jack kneeling by a broken fence, examining the wood carefully. You've got a lot of patience, she said, placing the basket down beside him. I don't think I've ever seen anyone so careful with something so old. Jack looked up and smiled faintly. Patience is the only thing that keeps things from falling apart. People, fences, even towns. Martha watched him for a moment. You really care about this place, don't you? I care about what it can be, he said, and about the people who live here. Especially you. Her cheeks warmed, but she didn't look away. I just help where I can, she said quietly. Jack shook his head. No, Martha. You do more than help. You inspire. People see you working and they start to believe. You're the reason a lot of folks have hope again. She wanted to argue, but she couldn't find the words. Pride and gratitude mixed together in her chest. For years she had felt invisible, overlooked, and unimportant. Now the very town that had ignored her was beginning to see her. And it wasn't just their eyes, but Jack's steady belief in her that made her feel strong. By midday, they were joined by a few other townsfolk who had come to lend a hand. A group of men carried old boards to repair the fences, while a few women brought water and shade. The laughter and chatter filled the air. Martha had never experienced anything like it. For the first time, she felt part of a community, not just a background figure. As they worked, a group of children ran past, chasing each other through the fields. One little girl tripped near the newly planted crops, and Martha hurried to help her up. Jack watched her with a gentle smile, seeing the kindness she offered naturally to everyone, even to strangers. "You really have a gift," he said quietly. "What do you mean?" she asked, brushing dirt from the girl's dress. "The way you care," he said simply. "Most people only look out for themselves. You look out for everyone." Martha's eyes softened. "I guess I never thought it was special. It's just what you do." Jack shook his head. "It's more than that. It's rare, and it's why I chose you." The day continued, full of hard work and quiet moments of shared smiles. By late afternoon, the barn was repaired, the fences sturdy and upright, and the new crops protected. Jack and Martha stood back to admire their work. "You know," Martha said, "I never imagined this place could look like this again." "Not after all these years," Jack nodded. "People can do amazing things when they believe in something. And when they work together, you've helped more than you know." Martha felt warmth in her chest, a feeling she hadn't known she deserved. Pride in her own strength, but also comfort in the knowledge that she had a partner who truly saw her. That evening, the sheriff rode by on his horse, tipping his hat as he passed. "Red Creek's lucky to have both of you," he said. "I thought you might struggle to get folks on your side, but you've got a way of doing things that makes people want to help." Martha blushed and nodded politely. Jack gave a small grin, glancing at her with a quiet pride in his eyes. As the sun set, the two of them walked back toward Martha's home. The field stretched out behind them, golden in the light of the setting sun. The town was quiet, save for the occasional sound of a dog barking or the clatter of a wagon in the distance. "You ever think about leaving?" Martha asked suddenly. Jack looked at her in surprise. "Leaving?" "Red Creek," she explained. "Before you came, I never thought there was anything here worth staying for." Jack stopped and considered her words. "I used to wander too," he admitted. "Never stayed anywhere long enough to call it home. But this place, it feels different, and you make it feel like it's worth staying for." Her heart fluttered at his words, and she looked down at her hands, embarrassed. I never thought anyone would say that to me." Jack reached out gently and touched her hand. "I'm saying it now. You make this place better. You make me better, and I'm not going anywhere." Martha's lips curved into a shy smile. She felt a courage growing inside her, something stronger than the doubts and fears that had followed her for years. With Jack by her side, maybe she could finally believe in herself the way he believed in her. Over the next few weeks, the town continued to thrive. Crops grew taller, the barns were solid, and fences stood strong. People started coming together for small gatherings, sharing food and stories and helping one another. Martha began baking for more than just her own table or the orphanage. She baked for neighbors, for friends, for anyone who needed a little comfort. Her bread and pies became famous in Red Creek, not just for their taste but for the care she put into them. Jack, meanwhile, continued his steady work. He repaired old tools, mended broken roofs, and worked the fields alongside Martha. He never boasted about his skills or expected praise. But the townsfolk began to notice the quiet bond between him and Martha. It was more than work. It was respect, trust, and something slowly growing that no one could ignore. One afternoon, a small group of children gathered near the fence, watching Martha and Jack repair a section of the field. "Why does he stay with her?" one boy whispered. "Because she's strong," another answered. "And she's nice to everyone." Martha overheard the children and smiled softly. For the first time, she realized that people were starting to see her for more than just her size. They were seeing her heart. As evening fell, Jack and Martha sat by the porch, tired but content. The sky was a deep shade of purple, and the first stars appeared. They shared a simple meal of bread and cheese, laughing quietly at small jokes and stories from the day. "You know," Martha said after a while, "I never thought I'd feel this happy." Jack looked at her with calm eyes. "Happiness comes slowly sometimes, but when it does, you notice it all the more." She nodded, feeling warmth spread through her chest. "Thank you, Jack, for seeing me, for believing in me." He smiled gently. "No one else has to understand. You know what matters." As night fell over Red Creek, the town settled into quiet calm. The fields glimmered in the moonlight. The barn stood proud, and in the middle of it all, Martha and Jack felt a peace they had never known before. Their work, their courage, and their quiet love for each other had not only transformed the land but also themselves. And somewhere deep inside, Martha knew that the life she had once thought impossible a life of purpose, respect, and love, was finally hers. All because a cowboy had chosen to see her heart, not her appearance, and in doing so had changed her world forever. The first light of morning in Red Creek spread across the town like a soft golden blanket. The fields were bright and green, full of life, and the barns and fences that Jack and Martha had worked so hard to repair stood tall and steady. The town itself had changed. Once quiet and tired, it now buzzed with a renewed sense of hope. Children played in the streets, neighbors stopped to chat, and the smell of baking bread drifted from windows across the town. Martha woke early, as she always did, but this morning felt different. She stretched and glanced out the window at the fields, now alive with rows of crops swaying gently in the breeze. Her heart felt light. She had never imagined that one day she could wake up and feel proud, not just proud of her work, but proud of herself. Jack was already in the field, checking the crops and repairing a small section of fence that had been damaged in a storm the night before. His shirt was damp with sweat, his sleeves rolled up, and the sun glinted off his hat as he worked. When he saw Martha standing at the door of her home, he smiled warmly. "Morning, Martha," he called, his voice carrying softly across the field. "Good morning, Jack," she replied, lifting her basket of bread. "I thought I'd bring breakfast out here today." Jack nodded appreciatively. "You don't have to, but I won't say no." She laughed lightly and walked toward him. Together, they ate quietly on a fallen log, sharing the bread and cheese she had brought. The air was filled with the gentle sounds of the town waking up, birds singing and the soft breeze moving through the fields. After breakfast, they began their work. The day was long, filled with mending fences, tending crops, and repairing the barn's roof. But it didn't feel tiring, not really. The work was shared, and the quiet companionship between them made even the hardest tasks feel lighter. When Jack showed her how to tighten the fence wires or check for weak boards, Martha listened carefully, her hands steady and sure. When she showed him a better way to tie the knots on the crops, Jack nodded with respect. They learned from each other, laughed at mistakes, and celebrated small victories together. By mid-afternoon, Martha paused, wiping the sweat from her forehead. "Jack," she said, "do you think we've done enough to make a difference?" Jack looked at the rows of green fields and the sturdy fences. "We've already done more than most would ever try," he said. "But it's not about doing enough. It's about trying every day, even when it's hard. That's what makes the difference." Martha smiled softly, feeling warmth in her chest. She thought about how far she had come, from feeling invisible in the town to standing here, respected and valued, side by side with a man who truly saw her heart. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, they stepped back from the work they had done and looked over the fields. Everything looked alive and strong. The land that had once seemed hopeless now thrived under their care. "Look at this," Jack said, his voice quiet with awe. "Who would have thought it could look like this?" Martha nodded. "It's beautiful," she said. "And we did it together." Jack glanced at her, seeing the pride and quiet strength shining in her eyes. "Martha, I never would have imagined that helping a town could change me the way it has. You've made me see what really matters, not land, not money, not what other people think. You've made me see that life is about heart, courage, and people who believe in each other." Her chest tightened. "Jack, I don't know what to say." "Then don't say anything," he said gently. "Just know that I mean it. You've changed my life." That night, the town gathered for a small celebration to honor the work that had been done. People brought food, instruments, and blankets to sit on. The children ran about, their laughter echoing through the fields. The adults mingled, sharing stories and smiles. For the first time in many years, Red Creek felt alive with joy. Martha stood quietly near the edge of the crowd, her hands folded in front of her. People came up to her, thanking her for the bread she had baked, for her kindness, and for her work in the fields. She felt overwhelmed by the sudden attention, but also deeply touched. Jack walked over and stood beside her. "See," he said softly. "People are starting to notice the truth about you. Not what they once thought, but who you really are. Martha looked at him, tears brimming in her eyes. I never thought anyone would see me like this, she whispered. I do, he said simply. Every day. As the evening continued, the sheriff came forward with a kind smile. Red Creek owes you both a debt, he said, his eyes on Jack and Martha. You've not only saved this land, but you've reminded all of us what real courage looks like. And I have to admit, I didn't believe it at first. But now, well, I see the truth. Martha blushed, and Jack placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. Together they smiled, feeling a quiet pride in their accomplishments. After the celebration ended and most of the townsfolk returned home, Jack and Martha walked back to the ranch under the soft light of the moon. The fields glimmered in silver, and the night air carried the scent of flowers and fresh earth. You know, Martha said softly, I never thought life could be like this, full of hope and purpose and happiness. Jack looked at her, his expression calm but full of warmth. It can be, he said. Sometimes you just need someone to believe in you, and sometimes you need to believe in yourself. She smiled, feeling a courage she hadn't known before. I believe now, she said. They reached the small home they had built together on the land Jack had earned. It was simple but sturdy, filled with the promise of a new life. Inside, the smell of baked bread lingered, and the soft light of lanterns created a warm, inviting glow. Jack set down the tools he had brought in and looked at her. This is home, he said quietly. And it's ours. We built it together. Martha nodded, feeling a deep sense of peace. I never thought I'd have a home, she admitted. But with you, I feel like I belong. Jack stepped closer and took her hands in his. You do belong, Martha. Not just here, but everywhere that matters. You've made this place better, and me too. Her eyes filled with tears, not of sadness, but of joy. I never imagined someone could see me the way you do, she said. He smiled softly. Then you've never met the right person before. But now you have. And I'm not going anywhere. They sat together on the porch, watching the stars appear one by one. The gentle breeze carried the quiet sounds of the town. The distant bark of a dog, the soft rustle of leaves, and the occasional laughter of a late-night traveler. Everything felt calm, safe, and full of promise. As the weeks turned into months, Jack and Martha's bond continued to grow. The town of Red Creek flourished under their care, and the people began to see not just the work they had done, but the love and respect that had grown between them. Children looked up to Martha as a figure of kindness and strength, while adults admired the quiet courage Jack had shown in choosing her when no one else did. And through it all, Martha realized something she had never truly understood before. Love wasn't about appearances, wealth, or fame. Love was about seeing the heart of a person, believing in them, and standing together through hard work, laughter, and quiet moments of peace. One evening, as they sat together on the porch, Jack looked at her with a calm smile. We've come a long way, haven't we? He said. Martha nodded, resting her head lightly against his shoulder. Yes, and I'm glad we did it together. Jack wrapped his arm around her, holding her close. Me too, Martha. Me too. You've changed my life more than you'll ever know. And I'll spend every day making sure you know how much you matter. Martha felt a warmth spread through her chest, a feeling of belonging, love, and purpose. For the first time, she knew she was exactly where she was meant to be. And as the moon shone over the fields they had worked so hard to save, Martha and Jack sat together holding hands, hearts full, knowing that they had built more than fences and barns. They had built a life, a home, and a love that would endure forever. The town of Red Creek remembered that summer not just for the crops and repaired buildings, but for the quiet lesson it taught them all. Sometimes, the greatest beauty lies in the heart, and sometimes, the person you least expect can change your world completely. And in the heart of it all, Jack and Martha's love stood strong. a love born not from appearances or chance but from courage, respect, and the belief in one another that nothing could ever break.